I'm Jordan.
And I'm Rosanna.
And on this podcast, we explore how to take life off autopilot
and relentlessly pursue a life worth living together. Welcome to Season 4, Episode 9 of the Relentless Pursuit podcast. You cannot stay in paradise.
No, you can't stay in paradise. So on this episode today, we're going to talk about a recent and fabulous trip that Rosanna and I just came home from, where we had a chance to drive down to Fort Worth, Texas, drop our kids off with my parents for a few days, and then go to Mexico, just the two of us, for over 5 days. But we want to explore the irony that we discovered there, which is even though we were having a fantastic time, there's a piece of us that does not want to stay there forever. And I found this really curious and interesting. So we're going to talk about this irony and some of the facets around what makes us feel that way.
Right, because of course, while we're on vacation, getting away from everything, we're talking about the podcast.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so where do you want to start?
All right, so let's just give a little bit of context. So as I said, we drove down. So we loaded up the kids into the van, and then we drive overnight most of the time down to Texas because it's like 15, 16 hours sometimes. So the kids are the quietest when they're sleeping. So it makes the trip more manageable for us. So then we spent like a day and a half, almost 2 days, down in Texas parents. With my family down there. My sisters live down there as well. And then after that, my parents were gracious enough to watch our kids so that we could just take some time, just the two of us. We went to an all-inclusive resort. We flew into Cancun. The resort was called Excellence Playa Mujeres. And it was, the way I described it to people was this. I said, if I were to go to heaven, I don't know what I would add to this all-inclusive resort to make it heaven. It was already
it's
there.
It's so good. And we've done this before. We've been to an all-inclusive resort 5 years ago. It was a secrets resort in Riviera, Cancun. So I mean, they're all relatively the same, but this resort
except flying. I think the only thing I would add is that I could just fly if I were in heaven.
Okay, there you go. You would fly without the airplane. You would just go yourself.
Like Superman.
This hotel or resort had 9 different restaurants. So we were there 5 nights, and we couldn't even try all of the different restaurants for dinner because there was so much to eat. Mm-hmm. And even at dinner, there were so many good things, and we tried, as much as we could, but there was just too much food to eat, and it was all good. We ate things like grilled octopus and flank steak and all the guacamole you can handle, all the drinks that you want and all the drinks that you can handle.
And people to bring them to you at any time of day.
Right. So, every request that you have is granted. Even the waitstaff there would say well, welcome home.
Yeah.
Welcome to dinner. Welcome home. They would say welcome home. And that they do. They try and take care of you so that you have all of the comforts and amenity of home, right? The room is beautiful. It's more beautiful than it needs to be because there's really only 3 things that are happening in that room because you spend most of the time at the pool, at the beach, on an excursion. But sunshine for days, sand for miles, it's perfect, right? Mm-hmm. And although I love my children, even more perfect, no children are there.
As I was going to say, the best part is the uninterrupted conversation. Or even just the lack of conversation. We could just sit next to each other for hours, and any thought that crossed our mind, we could just share it. Or not, right? We could just sit in the pool or sit poolside or be in a restaurant and just kind of be free to think and be free to converse and interact without interruption and without thinking about what someone else needed at that moment. So if y'all haven't had an all-inclusive resort experience yet, we highly recommend it.
And some people talk about going on cruises. We like the all-inclusive resort.
That's our thing.
You don't even have to leave because they have everything there.
Yeah, once every 5 years is not asking too
much.
But
I mean, I think I read 3 books. I think I read over 1,000 pages while I was there. It was just nice to be able to sit back, relax, unwind. I've had 3 weddings now. At the start of wedding season, and so there was an open weekend, so I didn't have to think about anyone's wedding. I put an away message up. I tried to really disconnect from all of that for a week and a half, even though I came back to doing a wedding just a few days later. And so it was just great to not have to worry about anything besides where you were going to eat next. And we didn't even have to worry about when, because we could just do things when we wanted. So it was very carefree. It was very laid back. But the first day is hard because you're still on a time schedule. I took off my watch. I stopped wearing my Apple Watch. It was just this, we have nowhere to go and we have nowhere to be. And we can decide on the drop of a dime what we want to do next. And we don't need to ask for permission or consider time schedules. And so it was pretty good.
Yeah. So we could go on just about the great experience that we had, but it was a great opportunity for us, and I think this isn't really part of the episode, but for as much as we talk about like patterns and schedules and routines and discipline, it's also important to break that every once in a while too. So we broke that really for the full 10 days that we ended up being out of town. So I think though in describing how much fun we had.
Did we describe how much fun we had? I mean, we had great fun. We rode a jet ski, right, on the ocean.
Yeah.
What do you call it? A wave runner.
Yeah.
And had a ton of fun with that. Jordan did some underwater.
It's scuba diving for the first time. Yeah.
We did massages. There was no shortage of fun.
And luxury.
And just laughing and enjoying one another's company, whether we were talking about something super in-depth, something super surface level, or even just joking with one another. We had a blast. And it's nothing that really can be replicated when you're at home in your normal routine, in your house with kids running around all summer.
Yeah. All right. So anything else you want to add?
No, but I wanted to get that in there.
Okay. So that being said, I was laying lifelessly on one of those floating rafts in the pool on what was our last full day there, and just this thought struck me that for as much fun as we were having, for as much luxury as we were privy to, we did not want to stay there, and I think that's really weird because why wouldn't you want to stay there? I mean, in a perfect world, if we had, whatever amount of money it would cost to stay there, if you could, bring your kids in and have that set up in whatever way you want, bring your friends could visit you, like you could just add to the list of experiences that you could put in this place for yourself that would make it even more luxurious. You still don't want to stay there. And this really kind of baffled me for a while. So today what we want to do is just explore the reason why, even when you're in the midst of paradise, at a certain point you kind of feel like, okay, I'm done. I'm ready to go back. Even though back at home are some of those like interruptions, the stressors, the work, the care and maintenance that life normally requires that we escaped from. Why do we want to go back to that? So I just wrote down a few questions here. I wrote down, why do we want to get back to our normal life? What is so special? Here's the way I phrased it. What is so special about life at home, the life that we wanted to take a break from, that we would leave the lap of luxury to go back to it? Why, Rosanna?
Well, I think there are a couple things. And I think the first thing is that, it's like that hindsight is 20/20. It's kind of like your vacation goggles. Like you get there and everything is perfect and it's wonderful. And then you kind of like, you take those off. You've been in the sun for a while, you take off your sunglasses. And I think it's easy to take our everyday blessings for granted. Like when you go away and you're distanced from the chaos that you're in, whether it's like work or home life or stressors or, whatever, maintenance on the home, all of that, right? Like when you're in it every single day, it feels like a lot. But sometimes when you kind of remove yourself from it and kind of just have a little bit of distance and a little bit of space to kind of be yourself and to process and all of that, like you are reminded about how lucky you are. And even how some of the trivial problems we have aren't really problems, and how grateful we are for the luxuries that we do have at home, like a home to come back to, and families that love us, and jobs that support us, and and careers that we are passionate about. Like it's good to get away from those things because too much all the time, you deserve a break.
Yeah, so even a short break, and we're really talking about, for us it was a total of 10 days that we were out of town. So even that short break really helps us see and maybe appreciate what we have day to day. It reminds me of What About Bob, where he's like, why don't you take a vacation from your problems?
I'm taking a vacation from my problems. Yeah. And, coming home from travel is also kind of a new beginning. You're refreshed and you're relaxed after your time off. You're sitting there at the pool on the last day on that raft and you're really just daydreaming, right? About like the podcast and what's next. And you come back, you're like, all right, listen, I've got 3 show ideas, like, right. Cause you've just had time to kind of just like relax and process. Some things kind of click into place. You have a new perspective and then you're excited about what comes from that rest. So like, it's like, now that I've been here, like I've decided on the things I want to achieve when I get back. So I think that's part of it. And then in a book called The Power of Meaning by University of Pennsylvania professor Emily Smith, evidence has shown that people who rate their lives with the most satisfaction are people with intense feelings of belonging and purpose. And so when you're on vacation, belonging and purpose kind of fall by the wayside. While you might make friends at the swim up
You make
pool,
your pool friends,
right? Or someone's reading a book and then you start talking, right? Your little vacation friends. Most people don't then go home and those aren't their close-knit relationships that they continue after that. It's just, some nice people that you meet on vacation. So belonging, but when you're at home, you have a sense of belonging in your community, with your family, with your friends, the people who know you best. And so that's part of what you're missing on vacation, right? Maybe if all of your friends were there, it'd be a little bit different, but for the most part, they're not with you. And purpose. Two things that are fundamentally missing in 95% of travel excursions. Travel is just a long period without any work and lots of time spent as a consumer. At the end of the day, we are in a tensionless state where all of our time and effort is spent being selfish, right? We're having fun, the fun that we want to have. We're, eating what we want, drinking what we want. We're having massages. It's just like this selfish, kind of like a pig in slop.
Oh, yeah.
And you
Completely self-indulgent.
Soak it in. You stay up late. You sleep in. You
order room service.
You order room service. You got the hotel hot tub. You got the hot tub in your room that's, looking out at the ocean. We were staying up and watching movies in bed because we don't have a TV in our bedroom, but we're like, we could turn something on and watch. It was just like two kids in a candy store, right? But we spent 6 days being selfish, and then it's okay, we're done now. Now I want to do something that has meaning, something that has purpose. And I think for us, that's why at the end of the vacation, we're ready to go home.
Mm-hmm. But even talking to other people too, they're like, yeah, I've been here for 7 days. I'm ready to head back, So I don't think we're totally unique. But I think that's interesting. All right. So you're saying it takes a type of selfishness to enjoy the kind of vacation that we did, which makes sense. But it's still, my question is still there. Why wouldn't we want to maintain that selfishness? So you're saying having a sense of purpose is letting go of a degree of yourself.
Yeah. Well, and then also in this book, they say it takes a few days or even a few weeks for some people for their mind to pick up on the absence of that. So it's almost like we're wired in who we are to have a sense of belonging and purpose. And so while we might be able to ignore it for a few days or a few weeks, ultimately as humans, we kind of come back to this need for purpose, belonging, structure, something to do other than be selfish.
Mm-hmm. So I think that makes it so within a few days then, yeah, you do kind of feel like, I'm looking forward to going and doing this back at home or getting into that. I feel like I'm reminded of a conversation we had, I think it was in episode 7 when we talked about fulfillment and the parable of the fisherman, and just kind of looking at this idea of, or maybe this is not universal, it might be more unique to us, but feeling like I need to be creating and contributing, right? There needs to be a degree of progress associated with the way that I feel like I want to be living. And you're not making very much progress when you're just laying there drinking alcohol next to a
No,
pool.
you're not. But that's also the difference between Americans and even other cultures. We always feel like we need to be doing something, right? Earning money, being at work. Europeans are so laid back and so different. They work a few hours a day here and a few hours a day there, and they're better at kind of resting in between. Mm-hmm. Whereas we burn ourselves out, then need a vacation for, so many days at a time, and then ultimately end up returning right back to where we were because we know no different.
Yeah. Or maybe there's a different, so purpose can manifest in multiple different ways, and sometimes that's dictated by your cultural context.
Yeah.
Okay. So, you have anything more? Or can I tell a story?
No, tell your story.
Okay. So I'm going to tell the story of a Twilight Zone episode. I'll just summarize it for everybody. This is from the first season that the Twilight Zone aired. It's called A Nice Place to Visit. And it goes like this. There's a criminal who is in the process of robbing a bank, and then the cops show up, and there's a shootout, and he gets shot. And it turns out that he dies. So he actually wakes up in the afterlife in a really luxurious apartment, and somebody walks in, kind of like this old, say kind of like this old, wise congenial kind of figure walks in and introduces himself. He's like, I'm your guide. So anything you want, let me know. And the guy is skeptical at first, but eventually he tries to rob his guide. And he's like, you don't have to rob me, but here's $200 in my pocket right now. That's enough to get you started. And he's like, okay. And then he asked for like more money and really anything that he wants. He's like, I want women. Like, here you go. There's some right here. I want to go to the casino. And he goes to the casino and it turns out like he wins. Like his number comes up like every round. And he's like, this is so fantastic. And so anything he wants like is just immediately granted to him. And then he asks his guide, he's like, well, wait a minute. Like, I don't feel like I belong here because I was a criminal. So what am I doing in paradise where I get everything that I want? And so he goes to like this hall of records and he looks at the records of his life and it's all the bad stuff that he did. He's like, this doesn't make any sense. And then, eventually it doesn't take too long. I'd say about a month in the timeline of the episode that he starts getting a little bit depressed. And this guy is like, well, what can I get you? Like, and what can we do to fix this? He's like, well, every time I play, I win. He's like, it stops losing in some of its luster. He's like, anytime I rob something, because he started like robbing things in this paradise, he's like, I get away with it too. There's no adventure, there's no mystery. And his guide is like, well, I can arrange things so that you lose every once in a while or whatever. He's like, no, because then I'll know it's arranged and don't bother. And then he becomes more and more dejected over this existence that he has. And he says, you know what, like this place is nice and everything, but I don't think I want to stay here. I think I want to go to the other place. Meaning like he thinks he's in heaven and he's like, I think I'm more cut out for hell. And his guide looks at him and says, you don't understand. This is the other place. Right.
Dun, dun,
so in classic Twilight Zone twist, you realize that at least in this sort of like metaphoric tale, hell in this story is depicted as the place where you get everything that you want.
And then you're still not satisfied.
And then, right. So there's something beyond that must be satisfying to the human soul. And I think we were certainly in heaven, like during this trip, but at the same time, knowing that we would come home back to the life that we've created for ourselves is comforting. And I think if we were trapped in paradise, so to speak, we would eventually experience similar feelings of dejection.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of begs the question, is the grass greener under a palm tree? We've actually like asked this question, is the grass, where is the grass?
Does grass grow under palm trees?
There was plenty of grass under the palm trees in Mexico.
Okay.
And I think the answer to that question is the grass is pretty damn green wherever you are. We just forget that because it becomes so routine and ordinary. When you're looking at everything through the same lens without any like kind of veering from the pattern or the path or taking a step back or taking a time out, right? Like when our kids are having a bad day and they're, hitting each other or they're responding rudely and we send them to timeout, right? The part of timeout is to kind of like step back from the situation, right? And you hope that they're kind of trying to process what it is. And so like, that's kind of what vacation is for us. We kind of walk away from the ordinary, right? The things that we've built, our values, the things that we say that we love, just for some like peace and rest. And when we come back, hopefully it makes a little more sense.
It's time out for adults, for mom and dad.
But like that's the question. Is the grass greener under a palm tree? It's not. The grass is green everywhere, but we forget.
Well, like you've said many times, the grass is green where you water it.
I have said that. Write that down.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I have some questions stemming from our own observations and from this story. You have some as well. You want to go first?
Sure. How about this? Do we romanticize the idea of vacation and travel and time away? Do we overly romanticize it?
I'm reminded of a quote from Mrs. Doubtfire.
Wow.
The stage movie that was. But remember, at the beginning of the film, they're having marriage problems, Robin Williams and Sally Field. And Robin Williams' suggestion is like, well, let's go on vacation. Right? And then, accurately, the wife is like, well, then our problems will be right back here when we get home. And then he says, well, we'll move. So, but I think that like many things, it might be, we'll call it like a Band-Aid. Like it's a temporary, like if we are experiencing feelings that we don't necessarily want to be experiencing in our everyday life. A vacation certainly doesn't fix them, but it is like a timeout from them. So I think in that sense, it can be romanticized. Great things can happen during the course of a vacation as well. I think entering a vacation with some intentionality is fantastic too. So we should be just mindful of like I asked you on the airplane on the way there, like, what are your expectations for this trip?
Yeah. And for us, it was all about like having some time to connect, having some time to like, obviously we ask each other these questions on the podcast, but we got into some really great conversations, and just to carve out that time where we're not on a watch, like we don't have to get back for a sitter, no one's interrupting us. Like it was so important for us, but it's not because we just started doing that on vacation. It's, values and things that we wanted to accomplish that we used in that time as an extension of the life that we're already living, just with a palm tree or two.
Yeah. So it certainly doesn't fix anything, but if you use the time intentionally, it can be gratifying, fulfilling, and maybe in unexpected ways.
All right. What about you? You have a question?
All right. Yeah. So thinking back to the tale that I just told, I have a few good questions here. All right. So I'm going to say, does earning something matter? So like we're just hanging out, in this resort or in paradise. And yes, we've paid for it up front, right? But I feel like everything is just kind of handed to you, right? Do you at a certain point feel like, okay, I need to earn something through my own efforts, my own hands, my own mind needs to create or needs to do the work that then manifests in a tangible reward?
I understand the question that you're asking in terms of like our trip. Like I feel like we earned that. Like we worked hard, right? 5 years ago, we said at our 10-year anniversary that our 15th anniversary we would go away, and we worked towards that for the last 5 years. I think that if we like went on vacation, like I know people who go on vacation multiple times a year. We don't do that. You're a teacher, and so you can't just take vacation anytime. And so summer is the only time. And we prioritize road trips with our kids and visiting family. And so like having to wait a few years at a time to go on a trip alone together, like I feel like we earn that time alone to be together. And we also obviously work hard to make the money to enjoy that time. Yeah. And so when I'm there, I don't feel guilty because I feel like we save up for it. We don't ask, people to watch our kids. Like we're like banking all of these points.
I'm not contesting. I mean, we certainly earned the trip, but I'm saying like if it were to be extended, right? If paradise is extended indefinitely, does some of the restlessness and despondency that you may feel as that went on, would it feel like I'm not kind of like the man in the story, like everything's just given? Do we appreciate something more, or do we appreciate ourselves more when we feel like the things that we are enjoying are coming from our own efforts?
Oh, yeah, 100%. I don't think there's a question in my mind. I think other people might be wired differently, but for me, I like to earn it. I worked a wedding last night, and it was a beautiful wedding, and I got to be a part of it. But I've worked harder for other clients at other weddings, and it's I earn the same amount of money whether I'm like dripping in sweat, covered in rain, a bee stings me, I cut myself, like regardless of the effort, like I make the same amount of money. But there's like there's a bigger sense of satisfaction when I'm there to like play a bigger part or like save the day or, like stop something, from like I feel like, yes, I've earned that money greater.
You feel a greater sense of purpose, I think, right? I did something that led to this very specific and joyful result.
Yeah. Do you have other questions related to that story?
No, it just makes me think of like kids these days too. They don't earn anything. But that is something to think about too. Like even with our kids, not that I want to talk about them too much this episode, but do we want to be conscious of how much they're earning and how much role they personally see themselves playing towards the outcomes that they experience? Or are they, in a sense, living in a pseudo paradise where, again, I'm like an old man complaining now, but everything is handed to them and they don't do anything for themselves, right?
Yeah, I think those are good questions. I think that's good for us to kind of to think about, and even to think about in the extension of our kids. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, what do they have to do to earn more of this or something that they're asking for, or is it just handed to them? Mm-hmm. That's a good question. I have another question. And this kind of stems from like the other place and this idea of being on vacation, but then also wanting to come back. Are we already living the life of our dreams?
Oh, that's a tricky question. So I think that's a bit of a dilemma, because if you say yes, then there's no incentive to, I think, continue to progress and change and grow. But if you say no, then it makes it sound like it's disappointing about the life that we have now. So I don't know.
Okay,
What would you say?
I'll answer it. I'll say yes, but just because we're living the life of our dreams doesn't mean that it's easy. Doesn't mean that it's without fault or error. Doesn't mean that it's without disappointment, right? Like we, have kind of taken to this idea of gratitude and being thankful and really always kind of like thinking about what we have and how we've gotten it and expressing thanks and all of that. And I think that's part of it, but it's, we wanted this family and we've made this family, like the six of us, right? And so, sometimes between the fingerprints on the walls and the noise and the bickering between siblings and the arguing over eating broccoli, like, right, we lose sight of the fact that we have made this beautiful family who, for all intents and purposes, are happy, healthy, and together. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes we just let those other little things kind of derail us from thinking that we're living our dream.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I'm going to try to heighten my illusions here, since I already quoted from Mrs. Doubtfire
and the Twilight Zone.
and Twilight Zone is good. So I'm going to reference Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. So those of you unfamiliar with this story, you should definitely check it out. But it creates this dystopian future where everybody in the world is extremely happy. And why is it a dystopia? It's because they don't really need anything. They can really, like, they're all like programmed to enjoy the job that they have. There's no struggle, really. Anything that they want is kind of immediately available to them. And if they happen to have a quote unquote bad day, there's a miracle drug that they can take with no side effects that just automatically makes them happy again.
That's the Soma?
Soma, yeah.
Soma.
So there's so many interesting nuances to this, but I want to point out I don't think you knew this, but my favorite character in all of literature is a character named Helmholtz Watson. I never proposed Helmholtz as a name for our kid.
No,
you should
you
be
didn't.
grateful.
All right.
But he's a character in the story because he ends up having a conversation with like the leader of this brave new world. And the leader is like, look, you have everything you need. So there are no more problems. There's no more like depression or anxiety. There's no more concern over death even. Like there's everything has been resolved. And so what Helmholtz actually ends up doing is he's interested in creating art and poetry. But he knows when he has every single need met that he will never create anything great. And so he accepts and even asks for exile into like a barren wasteland. And that's what he chooses, so that he can go on to suffer and to create something of meaning.
That's pretty deep.
So I say it in context of what you're saying too, because like we have a lot of beautiful things, but I would even argue that the argument over if kids are going to eat vegetables, right, or the fingerprints on the walls and all the things that drive us nuts, those in themselves are beautiful. And given the choice, we would prefer that over, I would say, like over like the perfect kind of like straight and narrow, like no fingerprints, no arguments, no messes, everything else.
Oh, right. And it's all about perspective, and it's all about like taking yourself out of whatever the hairy situation is at the time and realizing, right, like what's really happening, right? You're building a family, you're building a home, you're building a career, right? Even when I like go to work and there's a misstep, or it's like, it's an opportunity to learn, it's an opportunity to grow. Like that's where you find the meaning. That's where you find the purpose. That's where you start to elevate yourself to the next level. That's where you challenge yourself to be better. Like if everything is perfect and is handed to you, like where is any of that? Where does that get you? It just gets you into that spot. Mm-hmm. And then there's nothing else.
Yeah.
So
we don't necessarily want perfection.
No.
Or perfection is not perfect.
No.
So you can see the paradox that's created from that.
Yeah. And that, that you do need to have sacrifice and struggle and even regret. Like there has to be part of that. You have to get scared. There has to be fear. Like otherwise you're literally just idle. You're holding a mango margarita in the sunshine, and that's all there is.
Yeah. Which, and I will quote a Disney movie now, or reference a Disney movie.
Wow, you're
or
all over it
Pixar.
today.
But this is, many of you are probably more familiar with Wall-E,
Oh, yeah,
which is
that's
actually
right.
inspired by Brave New World. But you have like that sort of that utopian fantasy, and everybody is like, they have around the clock entertainment. And that's what the human race has become. And the story of Wall-E is the story of humans realizing that that's not actually what they want. There is not meaning and purpose in their current existence.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a fascinating commentary, but go watch Wall-E.
We went from a trip to Mexico to,
Dystopian fiction.
yeah, there we go. All in one episode. What else do you have? Do you have more questions, or are you ready to kind of wrap things up?
Yes, I have this question. We've touched upon this before, so I just want to ask it directly. So our trip to Mexico, we knew going into it we would only be there for 5 days. Does having something only temporarily make it more appreciated?
I think so. I don't think we often think of it that way. But remember when we were scheduling this trip and we were looking at calendar-wise, right? Ideally, we wanted to be there for like 7 days, right? Like kind of selfishly, like we need 7 full days, which we did 5 years ago. We had 7 full days. And this...
7 days.
What movie is that from? Is that The Ring?
Yeah, a horror movie.
So when we were booking it, I was like, well, and I remember saying to you, like, we don't need 7 days. We've even said if we had 2 full days together, like that would feel like
It
a long
feels like
time.
a lot,
And,
yeah.
right, in adult time, that feels like a really long time. So we said like 5 days. And so even just like knowing that it's 5 days, it wasn't, I don't think it was any less magical, or like it felt like a good time to be away. So like sometimes that we don't think it's long enough, but I thought it was great. But knowing that you have 5 days, you kind of prioritize like what comes before and what comes after those 5 days and what you want to do within those 5 days. And so like kind of just knowing that it's temporary, it's like you kind of soak it in. So like even though there may have been some angst on your part about like wanting to get home or wanting to come back to normal, it's like, we have this time, and let's enjoy it for what it is. I think about that a lot with parenting. Right, the days are long, but the years are short. Everybody who's older than us tells us that. And like when you're got a bunch of like toddlers and newborns at home and people are crying and there's a lot of diapers, it's hard to understand that. And then now that our kids are a little bit older, it makes a little bit more sense. But even people with kids that are older than us, they say the same thing, where it's like, this is temporary. And so for as hard as it is, everything is kind of temporary. And so trying to enjoy things for what they are at the time is very important. So kind of living in the moment and not worrying about what's next.
So almost like thinking about like knowing that it's so like childhood is so precious because it's transient. Like they're going to grow up and become people like us. And there's right. And I think about other things like knowing that there's an end point and envisioning that end point. I think of our friends who often listen to the show, moved to Colorado for 2 years and indicated that they're more likely to take advantage of the hiking and the biking and the snowboarding because they know they're not always going to be there. But then I think about life itself. Like, isn't life itself just temporary?
So temporary.
So this would be my last movie reference. I don't know why.
I know.
I've
You're not even like a TV or movie person. But,
no, but I'm
wow.
going to, again, I need to up my game after this show, but I'm going to reference Troy and Brad Pitt as Achilles. It references what I thought was an interesting quote that ends up getting overlooked throughout the rest of the film. But he is teaching someone else about death, and he says, "The gods envy you." And this character is like, "What do you mean the gods envy me?" It's like, the gods envy you because you can die. And every meal you have, every drink that you take is that much sweeter because you know that it will end.
It's pretty deep.
All right, so if I was holding a mic, I would drop it. So there's other questions here as well that I don't know if we're going to have time to get into, but I think that kind of captures like some of the complexity around the paradise of wanting to, or the paradox of wanting to capture paradise for ourselves, but at the same time, what paradise actually is really nuanced.
Well, what that quote makes me think of is this. We do have like a finite amount of time on this earth, and maybe soon we'll be here forever, depending on what technology and weirdo things that they create. But if we only have this short life. Now it's a little bit longer than it used to be, right? Maybe we'll be the ripe old age of 90 or 95. We have 95 years, which to us now, or when we're kids, seems like an eternity. But it's really not that much time. So what are we going to do with our life in that time? We don't have to do the same thing for the whole 95 years that we're here. We do not have to be the same person. And so like, again, the relentless pursuit, like, what do you want to do with your time? What do you want to do with your life? What do you want to try? What do you want to enjoy? What do you want to learn, right? Do it for a time, and maybe it's not for you, and move on to the next thing. Find a purpose, find a cause, find something. But you don't have to be that same person that you were from now until your very last meal.
Yeah. Well, that's why this idea is baked into the title of the show, right? Relentless Pursuit. And just like we think of like the pursuit of happiness as well. It's not the actual capturing of it that we want, but there's something fulfilling in the chase. Yeah.
Getting in the arena, getting dirty. I think that's still one of my favorite episodes, The Man in the Arena.
Yeah. All right. So that's season 1, episode 5. Everybody go check it out. All right. What else you got for us, babe?
I don't know. I think it's time to kind of go to takeaways. And I think I have one that's pretty short and sweet, and it's more of a question to the audience. And so this is kind of my thought with, you can't stay in paradise forever. Life is a collection of experiences. The question is, what experiences and opportunities are right for you? And if it's a trip, it's a trip, but our life shouldn't be dictated about, just taking a trip, right? It's not about buying the object or the car or the house. Like, what are the experiences you want to fill your time with? And a lot of people like to travel. A lot of people like to get away. Yeah. But those aren't the end all be all things, right? What are you coming back to? What is your purpose when you come back? And, who do you belong to? Mm-hmm. Who's a part of your community? What are you doing for them, for yourself, for each other?
All right. So purpose, meaning, community. And you can have those near and you can have those far, but prioritizing that over just a simple outcome or a simple destination.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening. As always, we want to remind you that if you haven't yet left a rating or a review on iTunes, we ask that you go there now and let us know what you think of the show with a 5-star rating. And check out the relentlesspursuitpodcast.com, where you can see more of what we are producing for all of you, and you can subscribe to our email list as well. We hope you enjoyed today's show, and we'll be back with you again next week.
See you next week. Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to today's show. We hope you will use this conversation as a starting point for your own. We hope you're encouraged to think and act more intentionally.
If you want to learn more, you can visit our website, therelentlesspursuitpodcast.com, where you can find notes on today's show, plus additional blog posts, and you can subscribe to our free members list.
Please subscribe, leave a review, and share with your friends.
Facebook and Instagram are 2 great places to connect with us for daily doses of our quotable quotes, behind the scenes, and real-time photos, videos, and challenges.
Until next time, let us know how you are taking life off autopilot
and relentlessly pursuing what matters.